Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Tranquil Living Uruguay podcast. Today, I'm diving into the real and practical details of what it's like buying property in Uruguay as a foreigner. I am first time trying out video, so let me know how it goes. And let's get into it. Uruguay is one of the most foreigner-friendly countries in South America when it comes to property ownership. There are no restrictions on foreign buyers, no special visa requirements, and ownership rights are the same as locals. So the process is the exact same for locals and foreigners alike. But as a foreigner, the process itself comes with its own expectations and rhythms. So the big main question is, can foreigners buy property in Uruguay? And it's a big yes. A yes so big that that was one of our driving factors for choosing Uruguay as a country to immigrate to. We were ready to settle down in a new place, and we really liked the ease of property ownership as a foreigner. We actually kickstarted our property purchase before beginning our visa application process. We had been looking on real estate properties advertised online, and we had our search narrowed down to two farmhouses that we really liked. So we got in touch with the real estate agent that was on the listing. She spoke English and she had extensive experience working with foreigners. So I think we basically got really lucky because she knew the process in and out and was able to clearly walk us through it and in English. So that was a big plus. And I don't know, it could have been by chance that it all worked out for us. So once she heard our story about how we wanted to move to Uruguay, she put us in touch with an immigration relocation specialist. And this referral and recommendation alone was invaluable to us. I'll speak more in detail about this eventually, but as an immigrant, every single person you meet along the path and your process of immigrating is really important. We literally started building our network from the moment we started our property search. So, moral of the story, network is everything. Okay, so first and foremost, I need to be clear about purchasing property in Uruguay. Having a real estate agent is not a requirement. In the US, it is necessary, but not in Uruguay. All you need to formalize a legal purchase of real estate property is a notary, which they call an escribana for female, escribano for a male. And that's it, literally. Coming from the US, we had the mentality of needing a real estate agent as a requirement, but that's not the case here. We went through the process with a real estate agent because we found our house advertised on the real estate company's website. And it's, in the end, what we felt comfortable with going in as a foreigner and our first time overseas real estate purchase. Although, like I said, you don't need a real estate agent, I'm glad we did because of obviously the network we started building just literally through our agent alone as the first step. And otherwise, it honestly would have been a train wreck, I think, if we went at it alone. So we weren't physically there in Uruguay as we began the home purchasing process. So we needed boots on the ground help, which ended up being our real estate agent. So I'll address a couple of things that stood out to us from the get-go of how the home buying process is different in Uruguay than in the US. The first one is when it comes to real estate agents. So, like I said, a real estate agent is not required to purchase a property in Uruguay. But the caveat is that when you do use a real estate agent, there's only one agent for both the buyer and the purchaser. Sorry, for the buyer and the seller. And it's the one who lists it, basically. And as an American, it sounds crazy, right? You don't have your real estate agent representing you, and there's no real estate agent representing the seller. But that's just how it is here. From the compensation side of it, the real estate agent gets a total of 6% commission from the sale of the purchase price of the property. So when it comes to both the seller and the buyer, that is split in half. So as a buyer, you pay 3% of the total purchase price plus the tax on that 3%, and then 3% of the purchase price plus the tax from the seller. There's no such, okay, so the second thing is that there's no such thing as a public Zillow website or even an MLS listing where you can find historical purchase and tax data on the home you're purchasing. It's a real bummer. The best you get is doing the actual market research, comparing home values of similar characteristics and qualities in the neighborhood. And this is essentially what the real estate agent does for you. So all you have basically is the listing itself on the real estate website or Mercado Libre, which is another website where a lot of real estate properties are listed by owner. Mercado Libre is actually an Amazon Etsy type site. And like I said, they have a dedicated real estate section, and usually it's kind of sold by owner if you look it up on Mercado Libre. Okay, the third shocking thing we learned that's different from the US is that there are no home inspection requirements. So essentially, home inspection doesn't exist here. It's always a buy as is scenario. And the best you can do is hire a reputable, trusted, licensed architect and have them do a site visit and provide an inspection report for you. And this is what we ended up doing. We did this, our real estate agent set it up for us. And if we didn't have an agent, we wouldn't have known this in the home buying process. In the end, we paid $1,000, about $1,000 for this report, and it was submitted to us in English, where the architect analyzed in detail the structure of the home and just in details about how it was structurally, the electrical, the plumbing, roofing, humidity, quality of the materials used to construct the home. And they recommended what would be needed to upgrade or change upon move-in or close to after move-in. And this report was absolutely helpful and worth it to us. We weren't physically there in Uruguay yet, and this report kind of gave us peace of mind of having an idea of what we were getting ourselves into. And because of this report, we were able to negotiate the price down. Additionally, our real estate agent also looked. Our real estate agent also took lots of videos and pictures of the property for us, which was super helpful. Again, our real estate agent made this possible for us because the boots on the ground was really, really key to all of it. It was absolutely worth it in the end, is basically the point I'm driving for us as a foreigner purchasing property here. From a negotiation perspective on the purchase price, it's typical for Uruguayan sellers to negotiate up to 10% of the advertised price. And it's also common for properties to be on the market for a long time. It's just known that property owners, they just have like no problem sitting on property for extended periods of time until they feel like they get the right selling price locked in. Okay, so back to my personal experience. You technically don't need to have any Uruguayan identification or, cedula, such as or even temporary residency or legal residency. We went about purchasing our property using only our passports and purchasing under our personal names. So I'll walk you through the process under like these circumstances, because I can't speak to doing it via other means, such as like via trust or LLC type equivalent. And in the end, this is one of the reasons why Uruguay is considered foreigner friendly because of the ease of process. And what else makes Uruguay foreigner friendly for investing? Like I mentioned, no legal residency requirement. Um, Another thing is you have the same legal and ownership rights as locals. There are no additional taxes to be paid just for being a foreigner. There's a really strong notary and registry culture here in Uruguay. So there's just a general high confidence in the notaries doing their due diligence. And the fifth, I would say, you can delegate power of attorney to purchase the property if you are not physically in the country to do it. So in the whole property purchasing process, your escribano or escribana, which is the notary, is the most important person in the buying process. The role of the notary is that they draft key paperwork and documents, such as like the pre-contract and final contract. They perform the full title search and study, where they go into the government databases and check things like ownership history, liens, they verify taxes have been paid on time. Um, if there's like an inheritance issue or situation going on with the sellers, this gets caught here in this process. Additionally, I've heard of stories where maybe a real estate agent isn't honest with the buyer about the actual land and property itself. Um, for example, if the property is in a protected area, for example, and there are restrictions in terms of what you can build or what you cannot build. For example, you found a house and you want, hey, in the future, you have the intent to build on that property. Well, there may be a possibility where you are not able to physically build on it because um, it's protected property under the government. So in that process, the escribana can communicate that to you and give you all the details if that's the case. They also coordinate everything in terms of getting the deed and the house registered in your name. And they coordinate the admin stuff of setting like up the date and time of the meetings for the buyers and sellers and the pre-contract and the final contract signings. Okay, so let's get into the timeline process for the contract of when you purchase a property. So the first step is you select the property. You work with a real estate agent on submitting the offer to the seller, and this is where you negotiate and finalize the purchase price. The next step is to get the notary involved. And the timeline in this takes days. It doesn't take it, in our experience, it didn't take very long. Um, and then in our experience, our real estate agent worked with a notary at a very large, trusted law firm here that has experience working with international clients. And since we began the process overseas, this was good because they provided all the documents translated in English to us. And as I'll get into it later, they have US-based bank accounts, which help with the ease of transferring funds to actually do the purchase. The notary also, the second step that the notary does is to draft the boleto de reserva. So this is basically the pre-contract. It's a formal preliminary agreement that usually locks in the deal terms, and the buyer has to send in a deposit, which they call a seña here, of 10% of the purchase price. And that 10% is standard. If the deal doesn't go through, then deposit gets lost. And this is to make sure that the buyer is serious about the offer itself. And this document itself is signed by all parties. Timeline wise, it takes about a week to set up. And this is like formally entering escrow for Americans out there. For everything that is signed, it has to be signed in person in front of the notary, and all parties must be present. So, fun fact, if the home is being sold by a married couple, both spouses need to be present. In Uruguay, when a married couple acquires assets, it's considered community property, and assets are automatically jointly owned. And there's a caveat here where some married couples are actually legally married with separation of assets. So, in that case, if it's just one person in the marriage that owns the home, just that one person has to show up. If not, both have to be present. Okay, so for the buyer during this step in the process, the pre-contract, the buyer needs to comply with real estate and banking regulations, and every buyer has to fill out a financial form indicating like income information, origin of funds, proof of funds, a signed declaration saying that the funds related to the purchase of the property are not related to criminal, gang activity, or laundering, or any terrorist activity. So legally, they need to know where the money for the purchase is coming from. And in order to do that, you can show that in the form of maybe a recent property sale. And if you can provide a copy of the sale of that contract, or it could be from your portfolios, stocks, bonds, a bank letter. They'll also accept like a bank letter from your banking manager saying that you've been a client with them since X and X date. You're in good standing, you have sufficient funds to purchase a property in Uruguay. And also, it's also recommended to provide a letter in good standing from your accountant stating that you have filed all of your tax returns and paid your taxes on time. Any information, financial information, is to the notary is helpful. Okay, so step 3 in the process would be the notary drafts a reserva de prioridad while they do the title search and research. And this is basically a formal action filed by the notary that puts a hold on the property in the registry to protect the asset from being sold to somebody else while the notary is doing the title research process. The timeline for this research process, I would say, is about 2 to 3 weeks for the notary. So not too long, but it's basically like an average timeline. So step 4 would be the escritura de compra-venta. And the compra-venta is the name of the final closing document. So this is the formal closing where the final contract is signed by all parties. Escribano, the escribano or notary role is key. All parties are physically present, including the real estate agent, if there is one. And this is the process where the notary reads the contract out loud verbatim from page 1 to the end. In our case, we actually had an inventory of items included in the contract provided by the sellers, and each item on the inventory was read aloud. And at this meeting, buyers hand over, once the contract is read, it's physically signed by everyone. The buyer hands over a cashier's check, which is also called a letra de cambio, for the remaining balance, which is the remaining 90% of the purchase price, because 10% was put down as a deposit at the beginning of the process. Additionally, a cashier's check is also handed over to the real estate agent, which is 3% of the total purchase price plus tax from the buyer, and then the 3% plus EVA tax of the purchase price for the seller. And once, like I said, the documents are signed, the cashier's checks are handed over, the seller hands over the keys, and that pretty much, oh, and then you also have to obviously pay the notary as well. That could be done via a wire transfer, or you can also bring a cashier's check too. So in the end, cashier's checks are usually 30%. I mean, sorry, cashier's checks are usually $30. here from a local bank. So those are extra additional costs to keep in mind. $30 for each cashier's check to hand over in this meeting. And if you have a local bank account, you ask for the cashier's check in your name and then you sign it there at the time of the closing. If you sign it before, anyone can cash it in if you happen to lose it. So don't sign it until you are in this meeting. And then the escribano, the notary, also needs a copy of the check, so it's filed with the documentation. So in total, escribano costs consist of the following. The registration and title search, which is about $400. And this is the in-depth search that the notary does to make sure that the house is free of any kind of debts, liens, taxes are paid, etc. The second cost is Montepio Notarial, which is a legal admin fee for the official fiscal stamp required on the deed, which is the compraventa. And this contribution also goes towards the Uruguayan Social Security system for notaries. Then the next cost is ITP, which is Impuesto a las Transmisiones Patrimoniales, which is 2% of the cadastral value of the property. This varies by deal, but ours came out to about $75 US dollars. And this is the property or title transfer tax that is used to calculate, sorry, the um, cadastral value of the property is used to calculate property taxes here. And that value is, determined, by the government, the municipality. And the value is typically based on factors such as location, size, and property type. So the notary gets all this information of the estimated costs and will provide to you ahead of time. Then the second cost would be the notary fees. And a standard across the board, notary fees are 3% of the purchase price of the house, plus the EVA tax, which is 21%. And then the payment to the escribano for all of these services and fees and taxes, like I said, can be done via a bank transfer if you are physically present in Uruguay and you have an Uruguayan bank account, or a wire transfer if it's coming from overseas. Other miscellaneous costs are what I mentioned, the architectural report earlier, the cashier's checks, wire transfers, and if you have a real estate agent, the real estate agent fee. In regards to the timeline, it doesn't move that slow, to be honest. I think the notaries move very quickly from my experience. Start to finish can last between 30 to 60 days tops, as long as everything goes smoothly and there's no issues in or hiccups in the actual title search process. What takes patience is going to the bank. If you are physically in Uruguay and you have an Uruguayan bank account that you are using to provide funds and purchase this property, going to the bank to get the cashier's check is what takes patience. First and foremost, if you don't know, banking hours in Uruguay is in the afternoon from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. And one time when I had to get a cashier's check, it took me almost 2 hours waiting just to get these cashier checks for me, just to be seen because it was a very busy location. And I thought going at the time of opening, it would speed along the process, but no, I mean, I was already probably like 12th in line, I would say. Um, but anyways, and then other than that, just the patience of having things in Spanish and then the translation in English and that kind of thing. That's what takes patience, I would think, about anything. But whether you, in the end, if you're planning a move here to Uruguay, exploring investment options, or if you're just, researching life abroad, I hope this episode kind of gave you a grounded firsthand look at what buying property is like in Uruguay. Um, just taking a look at the process itself, potential cost, what takes patience in it all, and in the end, if it's worth it for you. So thank you so much for watching or listening this podcast today. This is my first time doing it video. I hope you enjoyed it. My goal of Tranquil Living Uruguay is to be your passport to Uruguay, to provide as much value as possible for those curious about Uruguay, which is a place that I call a hidden gem south of the equator. So whether you're traveling through or if you're an aspiring expat, I share real life lived experiences. And remember, life abroad doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be tranquil. So don't forget to subscribe. If you want more of this content, please like, follow, and send in your comments. I read them all. Cheers.